From fascist real estate laws to just being so darn expensive, Canada has a lot of problems. And since Jordan Peterson's from Canada, he's always talking about the country. But the question is, how does Peterson feel about his homeland? For starters, he's not liking the direction his country is heading in. Peterson believes that his nation is under attack from left-wing activists who ensure that Canada's economy just doesn't compete on the global scale. That's exactly why he's so against the idea of green energy, cause he feels that Canada needs to take advantage of its natural resources to ramp up its economy. For example, there's new legislation that goes by the name of Just Transition. Just Transition talks about how Canada should now start stepping away from fossil fuels and instead focus on wind, solar, hydro, and nuclear energy. Jordan Peterson says that this new piece of legislation threatens the country's survival and that it just won't be able to survive economically if it goes ahead with this plan. At the same time, talking about Quebec's ban on fossil fuels, Peterson said that Western Canada should leave this diluted union. But that's not all that he hates about Canada. In a tweet, Jordan Peterson stated that the country's judiciary was as compromised as the government itself. He also talked about how a social worker in the North American nation was fired because he associated with the psychologist. That does pose a problem, doesn't it? Where the heck is the freedom of expression left-wingers love talking about? If you could get fired for merely associating with Dr. Peterson, then are any of us really safe in this new version of the Western world? However, Peterson doesn't feel like all of Canada is a problem. He feels like the problem is mainly Toronto. The guy isn't wrong, you know. Take the case of Isaiah Shofkit, for example. He's an 18-year-old high school student who successfully advocated for the removal of the standard grade 11 English curriculum. He feels that classics taught by Shakespeare and Charles Dickens are irrelevant in today's world, and he advocated replacing those with the works of Indigenous authors. Now, there's no doubt that everyone should also study Indigenous authors, yes, but what the heck is wrong with Shakespeare and Dickens? The two have contributed more to Western society than we ever will. This news angered Dr. Peterson. He talked about Toronto leading the way in virtue signaling woke idiocy. Peterson also mentioned that we need to take power back from school boards and from these idol worshippers and But this isn't even the worst thing about Canada, according to Peterson. He's appalled at the country's assisted dying program. And seriously, what even is that? Rather than therapy, rather than helping people through spirituality and physical activity, the country is going to just let people die? And for what? So that their health system doesn't collapse because of their poorly managed economy and big government? Peterson hates that this is going on in Canada, and he believes that there are so many solutions to this rather than just ending someone's life. The government claims to want to protect the lives of its citizens, so why is letting them die being presented as a possible solution? Other than that, one of the biggest mistakes that Peterson thinks Canada makes is to align itself with Norway, because the truth is, Canada can't have the best of both worlds. So the North American nation wants to oppose big oil, but it also wants to emulate Norway. How is that possible? Cause yes, Norway has a socialist democratic system, and the lives of its citizens are heavily subsidized by the government. However, Norway can do that because of all the crazy oil profits that they've made and continue to make. The Scandinavian nation has sold oil for years now to be able to give its citizens that kind of life. But Canada, that's a whole other story, cause with the GDP lower than the entire state of Texas, how the heck does it plan to give away free stuff to all its citizens? And while Canada has loads and loads of problems, Peterson thinks that there's only one man who's responsible for all of them: Justin Trudeau. No one, and I mean no one, does woke virtue signaling better than this guy. He's going around calling everyone a fascist, and he's taking away everyone's freedom of expression, whereas a few decades ago, he was happy doing blackface. He represents everything everything that's wrong with the Western world today. So what does Dr. Peterson think of the guy? Well, for starters, Peterson feels that Justin plans to kill the agricultural, forestry, and energy sectors in Canada while failing to save the planet as well. Peterson also talks about how food inflation in Canada has hit double digits. However, the Trudeau administration just refuses to act. And he ain't wrong, because millions of Canadians are suffering, and yet the Trudeau government is more interested in building up a woke facade. When New Zealand's ex-Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, resigned, Peterson tweeted, "One down, Trudeau to go." And if that wasn't enough, he even tagged the current Prime Minister of Canada. Peterson even talked about how he's being treated terribly by the government and how that proves that we should all be worried about Trudeau, cause the guy likes control, doesn't he? You say one bad thing about him and boom, he's out there trying his best to destroy your reputation. But don't worry folks, Peterson's got hands for real. On Twitter, Jordan Peterson went off on Justin Trudeau, talking about how he's completely manipulated the Canadian news service, the CBC. He also talked about how the froze people's bank accounts and how he falsely claimed foreign interference. Peterson also mentioned just how poorly Justin managed the whole trucker situation and how he brought in the National Emergency Act, an act that was meant to be used for war or an utter catastrophe like flooding or an earthquake. Jordan also mentioned that if Justin Trudeau had an ounce of integrity, he would resign and that he would never, ever run for office again. Dr. Peterson also mentioned that the Prime Minister has no backing other than his superficial charm and the brand recognition of the Trudeau dynasty. That's true, isn't it? For example, Canada is going through its toughest time in ages. And what is he so pressed about? Ukraine. Like, come on, dude. Let that go and try to get your own house in order first. But nope, he's going to try his best to hide his incompetence. Which is exactly why Jordan Peterson's being forced into a re-education program. Alright, look, Peterson's criticized Canada quite a lot, and he's criticized Trudeau quite a lot. But how is that any different from Ian Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez constantly bashing America? They're always talking about what a terrible place America is and everything that's wrong with the American foreign policy. But guess what? They're lauded as heroes. On the other hand, when Jordan Peterson talks about how he feels about his homeland, Canada, he's being punished. Make it make sense. Cause you know what's about to happen? Peterson might lose his license to practice if he doesn't submit to the mandatory social media communication retraining by the College of Psychologists of Ontario. This is scary, cause the board will demand progress reports too, and if it doesn't feel like Peterson's making the right efforts, it'll take away his ability to practice. So of course, this just adds to the many reasons Peterson dislikes his homeland. And now you know how Jordan Peterson feels about Canada.